Every day, strikes make headlines. So it's a double irony when the strike is aimed at a national newspaper. By the time this long and bitter strike by a small group of workers was over, it had become possible the paper would die. Was the unofficial strike justified? And could it have lasted so long without the intervention of such semi-professional agitators as Maoist student Donald Dowd? Defence Counsel Charles Lotterby will say that this is what the trial is really about, that a man is being victimised, prosecuted only because the authorities are sick and tired of him. Yet Dowd is not charged under the Industrial Relations Act. Following an incident, a dozen men were charged with intimidation and illegal picketing, and they've already been tried in a magistrate's court. More than half were acquitted. Only Dowd has elected to have a jury trial before Mr. Justice Campbell, under a little-known legal right, as Crown Counsel Andrew Logan QC explains.
And the prosecution will show that this small group of men, unofficial strikers, took it upon themselves to prevent delivery of newspapers to wholesalers, at first by means of legitimate persuasion. But one morning a driver would not turn back. Men lay in front of his van. Abuse was shouted until some men, Dowd amongst them you will hear, climbed upon the van, broke its windscreen and tried to break open its doors. Only then did the police act to arrest those pickets involved. It is usual for cases of this sort to be heard in a magistrate's court, and all the others accused have so been tried. Dowd alone has taken the almost unprecedented course, under Section 9 of the 1875 Conspiracy and Protection of Property Act, of having his case heard here, in a Crown Court, before judge and jury. He has this right, and no doubt his reasons. I call first the van driver, Arthur Raymond Barrett.
Yes, that's him.
And you're certain that the accused, Dowd, was amongst those men who climbed onto your van?
I'm certain.
Now, will you describe in detail, Mr. Barrett, what happened from the moment that you drove towards the pickets?
Well, they all moved out across the road. They sort of spread out like in front of me to try and stop me. They were gesturing for me to wind the window down so that they could talk to me. Obviously, you can't hear much with the window up. But I didn't. I just very slowly kept creeping forward, not stopping, in first gear so they could all get out of the way.
And did your van touch any of the men as you were edging forward like
that?
No,
they touched the van. They sort of pushed on the front, you know, to try and stop it. But obviously you can't do that. So, a couple of the men ran on ahead and just lay down in the road. Well, they just lay there, so of course I had to stop. Couldn't very well run over them, could I?
And then?
Then they all came clustering round. They were banging on the roof, banging on the windows. Some of them climbed up on the van and tried to force open the doors, but I'd locked them.
Did Dowd play any part in this?
Him? Yeah. He did the lot, he did. He climbed up and banged, started shouting, tried to bust open the lock, and then someone smashed the windscreen.
Was that Dowd?
I didn't see, probably.
My lord.
Well, he was egging them on, anyway.
But how was he egging them on, Mr. Barrett?
Well, you know, gestures and waving. Because he was the first one to climb up, and he told the three men to go and lie in the road. Then all hell breaks loose. He starts shouting out. "Nobody gets through, lads," he shouted to the men. "And back up, you black-leg bastard," to me. "Go on, get out of it, you blackleg. Who's paying you? Which of the fat cat bosses paid you to strike break? Call yourself a worker?" Things like that.
And do you call yourself a worker, Mr. Barrett?
I am a working man, yes.
Are you a trade unionist?
I am, and in very good standing, and I have been for the past 15 years.
Why weren't you on strike with the others, then?
Well, it was unofficial, wasn't it? This was not an official strike. They had no right in striking.
It was an unofficial strike, then,
yes, it was, and it very nearly finished the paper and all. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Without any union support or authority
Absolutely
whatsoever?
right. The union were not behind this. And in my opinion, there's too much of that sort of thing.
Mr. Barrett, you knew that the newspaper had ceased publication during this unofficial strike, did you?
I knew, yes.
So that even had a van got through on some earlier day, there would have been no newspapers to carry away and distribute?
No.
And how was it that you came to drive your van there on this particular day, then?
Well, I was sent.
Yes, of course.
Yes, but anyway, the paper had started printing again. They'd started printing a few because the strike was almost over. As a matter of fact, it would have been over weeks before if it hadn't been for people like him.
What do you mean the strike was almost over?
Well, it was. It was almost over. They'd lost. Most of the men were going back to work. As a matter of fact, everybody was back the very next day.
So that in no way at all were you any kind of blackleg?
Well, how could I have been? The strike was not official.
And when your van was being attacked, Mr. Barrett, what did you feel?
Oh, I felt bloody scared. Oh, excuse me.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Mr. Barrett.
You are certain that Mr. Dowd was amongst the men who climbed on your van?
I am?
You recognise him?
Yes.
You recognise him when you first saw him amongst the pickets?
Well, how could I have done? Never set eyes on him before.
You work for a newspaper?
Yes.
You read newspapers?
Yes.
You watch television?
Yeah.
Yet the face of a man who's become a national figure thanks to the press and television companies was completely unknown to you?
Well,
Yes?
well, I'd heard of him, Dowd, but I didn't know what he looked like.
I suggest you must have seen him amongst the pickets and instantly known who and what he was.
No.
You will at least admit that you have heard of Mr. Dowd.
Oh, yes. I've heard of him.
You say that as if you don't much care for what you'd heard.
Did I?
Do you?
Do I what?
Do you much care for what you'd heard about him?
Not much, frankly, no.
Dislike him, do you?
I don't know him.
You dislike what you'd heard about him?
Heard. My lord, isn't this hearsay?
We shall not know until we hear it, shall we, Mr. Logan?
No, I can't very much say I liked what I'd heard about him, no.
Why?
Why what?
Why didn't you dislike? Why did you dislike what you'd heard? What had you heard about him?
Well, I'd heard about what he does.
What does he do?
He's a professional, isn't he?
A professional what?
Well, I don't know what you call it. You couldn't call it a politician because he doesn't represent anyone. A professional political agitator.
Well, that's a round phrase, Mr. Barrett. I wonder where you heard it.
Oh, I didn't hear it anywhere.
Made it up, did you?
I must have done, yes.
Do you read the Daily Mail, Express, Telegraph?
Sometimes.
Not very left-wing papers, are they? Do you know if you read any of these papers on the 13th of November last?
What? How would I remember?
Well, let me read you a news item. It's from a speech reported in all of them, made by the Tory MP for South Fulchester. Dowd certainly isn't what he claims, a politician. He represents no one in this country anyway. Call him a professional muckraker, an agitator. The British people have had enough of Reds like him. You read that speech, Mr. Barrett?
I don't remember. Probably yes.
Remember it well enough to use it as your own? Would you agree with the sentiments expressed in that speech, Mr. Barrett?
Well, I couldn't very well disagree with an MP now, could I?
You've had enough of Reds like Dowd, have you?
Well,
You're a Tory yourself, aren't you?
Mr. Lotterby, that is not at all a proper or relevant line of questioning.
My lord, I'm trying to show that...
I know what you're trying to show, Mr. Lotterby, and even if you were right, you can only aggravate the matter.
I should be grateful if your lordship would allow me to finish.
Very well, but I have warned you that such questions to this witness are not admissible.
My lord, I'm attempting to show prejudice on the part of this witness and a political bias.
Mr. Lotterby.
My lord, I have no objection to this witness's character and politics being put in evidence. It will let in matters that I shall be glad to have raised. Neither, my lord, as far as I know, is it yet evidence of moral degeneracy to be a Conservative.
I'm very grateful to you for your assistance and for your generosity, Mr. Logan. However, this is not a political trial, and I will not have it made one.
My lord, with respect, it is a political trial in the sense that this witness is motivated by his political views and his dislike of the defendant's political views.
A man stands accused of intimidation under the 1875 Conspiracy and Protection of Property Act, Mr. Lotterby, following a certain incident, no more, no less. Now, members of the jury, in Britain no one can be prosecuted for his political beliefs. However, each man is answerable for his actions. You will therefore put out of your minds all question of politics.
My lord, I concede that nobody should be prosecuted for his politics.
You are being discourteous, Mr. Lotterby.
I'm sorry, my lord, but I contend that this is a patently trumped-up charge.
And
brought
you
about...
will have every opportunity of convincing us of that if you can. That is your job. Now, please let us hear you get on with your case, and if you please, no more political palliastrics.
My lord?
Mr. Lotterby?
I don't think the jury may know the meaning of the word palliastrics.
Is that so? Then perhaps you would be good enough to enlighten them for me.
Well, my lord, my Greek is a bit rusty, but competitive gymnastics?
Just so.
Is it gymnastics, my lord, when the defence tries to show that a witness's evidence is prejudiced?
My patience is getting very strained with you, Mr. Lotterby. If there is any prejudice, you have demonstrated it. I have ruled this is not a political trial, and I will not have you introducing political issues. Now get on with your cross-examination, or let us get on with other evidence.
That is your ruling, my lord?
It is.
Mr. Barrett, you still maintain that as you approached the pickets, you did not recognise Donald Dowd?
I did not recognise him.
He said to the three men to go and lie down in the road. He shouted, "Nobody gets through, lads, and back up, you blackleg bastard, back up. Go on, get out of it, you blackleg. Who's paying you? Which of the fat cat bosses paid you to strike break?" Dowd shouted all that, did he?
Yes.
What a lot for you to memorize. Did you have a tape recorder in your van?
Well, I wouldn't swear to every word, but it was near enough word for word.
Really? And you also said in your evidence in chief, "They were gesturing for me to wind down the window, to talk to me. You can't hear much with the window up." How did you wind down your window?
No.
No? Then how did you manage to hear and to memorize so many words?
Ah, well, the windscreen was broken by then.
So the windscreen was already broken when Mr. Dowd told the men to lie down in the road?
Oh, no, not by then, no.
How can you have heard what he is supposed to have said then?
All right, I didn't hear the words, but that's what he was telling them, wasn't it? After all, that's what they went and did, didn't they?
So you didn't hear any words at all? Mr. Barrett, are you normally a delivery van driver?
Well, I work out at the transport pool, and I'm in the union.
But isn't your usual job as chauffeur to the deputy chairman?
Yes, sometimes, but...
But on this occasion you agreed to go and drive a delivery van.
Yes.
So for all your indignation, you really were no better than a blackleg, a strikebreaker.
No.
Do you know how many policemen were present and how many pickets on that day?
Well, I didn't count them, but...
As many as 14 policemen to watch over less than 24 picketers.
Well, yes, it could have been.
Even more police than on previous days. Mr. Barrett, do you have a lot of respect for law and order, the police force?
Well, I think they do a difficult job, yes.
Are you a betting man?
Betting? No.
I never have a flutter on the Derby or the National.
Oh, that, yes, sometimes.
Would you back 14 trained alert policemen against less than 24 ordinary working men?
Yes, but they weren't all ordinary working men, were
But
they?
how could you have been scared? And if they weren't all ordinary working men, who else was there?
Well, he's no ordinary working man, for a start.
No? What would you call him?
Mr. Lotterby,
My lord.
I only want to remind you again, take care with the drift of your cross-examination.
Is there some reason, my lord, why I shouldn't ask this question?
No.
Oh, really, my lord, I must confess I'm beginning to find it most difficult to conduct the defence with all these restrictions. I may not raise the fundamental issue of politics nor of prejudice. Now, I'm not allowed to cross-examine a witness according to ordinary rules without a caution. I only hope the jury will be able to draw their own unbiased conclusions. May I continue, my lord?
I'm sure the jury will make all due allowance for histrionics, and the fact that your strength of feeling in this case must explain if it doesn't excuse your conduct. I'd be very grateful if you would continue with my warning in mind.
Mr. Barrett, if he's not an ordinary working man, what is he?
Well, he's no more an ordinary working man than you are.
What is he?
There's another one of them, isn't he?
What?
Well, I don't know what you call it, a student.
Isn't he?
Well, he doesn't seem to do much studying, does he?
What is he?
Well, he's a bloody commie, if you ask me, with orders from Moscow or Peking or something to come down here and stir up as much trouble as he can. And I'll tell you something else, I know what I'd like to do with...
Another of them, you said? Do you include me too?
No.
And anyone who doesn't share your views, he's a commie, is that it? And you know what to do with them, eh? You couldn't have known Dowd out of 35 people, couldn't have known he was one of the crowd milling around your van, couldn't have heard him through your closed window, could you? In fact, because of your prejudice, you came here and lied. Lied deliberately,
No,
didn't you?
I did not.
You lied,
Well, I don't care what you say. It was him. Dowd climbed all over my van. Dowd tried to open that door and get at me. Him. Dowd.